June 14th, 1944, Dearborn, Michigan, inside the River Rouge Plant, the night shift siren screams, not to end work, but to begin it. The sound cuts through the humid summer air like a warning. Steel doors slide open. Conveyor belts jolt to life. Overhead lights blaze on in white rows that stretch farther than the eye can follow. The factory does not wind down as the sun disappears. It accelerates. A line of German prisoners of war stands just inside the entrance, guarded but not rushed. They wear field gray uniforms faded from months of captivity, boots scuffed thin, faces leaner than when they crossed the Atlantic under guard. Among them is Oberleutnant Karl Fischer, formerly of the 352nd Infantry Division, captured near St. Lo only weeks earlier. His hands are clasped behind his back, posture rigid out of habit. His eyes are not. They move everywhere. Engines roll past on overhead chains, swaying slightly like carcasses in a butcher's shop. Sparks leap from welding torches in bursts so bright they sting the eyes. The air smells of hot oil, ozone, and fresh paint. The floor vibrates faintly beneath their boots, a constant low tremor that never settles. Fischer glances instinctively at his wrist, then remembers his watch was taken when he surrendered. It doesn't matter, his sense of time is already slipping. It is nearly midnight. An American officer, Captain Robert Hayes, U.S. Army Ordnance Corps, walks ahead of them, clipboard tucked under his arm. He speaks loudly to be heard over the machinery, his voice calm, almost conversational. "This is Assembly Line B," he says. "Engines, we finished Line A's output about 3 hours ago." One of the Germans finally speaks. Feldwebel Otto Kranz, former mechanic, steps half a pace forward before remembering himself. His English is rough but serviceable. "Excuse," he says, eyes locked on the moving line. "When does night shift end?" Hayes doesn't stop walking. "It doesn't," he replies. "This is the night shift." Kranz blinks. He looks at the American guards, expecting a joke. None comes. They pass a clock mounted high on a steel pillar. Its hands tick steadily toward 12:00 a.m. Beneath it, a fresh line of workers' clocks in men and women, sleeves rolled up, lunch pails in hand. They take positions without hesitation, relieving the previous crew with practiced efficiency. The line never pauses. Not even for a minute. Fischer's stomach tightens. In Germany, factories go quiet after dusk. Air raid sirens, blackouts, bomb damage not yet cleared. Machines idle for lack of power, lack of parts, lack of men. Here, the lights are brighter at night than anything he remembers from before the war. They turn a corner, and the scale reveals itself fully. The building does not end. It stretches on, bay after bay, ceiling disappearing into shadow far above. Rail lines run directly through the interior, freight cars already waiting, loaded not with raw material, but finished components. Trucks idle at loading docks on both sides, engines running, drivers drinking coffee as forklifts weave around them with impossible precision. One of the prisoners whispers, barely audible over the noise, "Main got." Hayes hears it anyway. "We get steel by the trainload," he says, gesturing to a stack of rolled sheet metal taller than a house. "Coal from Pennsylvania, rubber from synthetic plants out west. Aluminum's allocated, but we don't run short." He says it casually, like discussing the weather. Fischer stops walking without realizing it. A guard touches his arm, firm but not aggressive. Fischer nods and continues, but his eyes remain fixed on the metal. He does the calculation without meaning to. Tonnage, output, transport time. It doesn't make sense. They reach a raised platform overlooking final assembly. Below them, completed engines are lowered into waiting frames. Serial numbers are stamped, inspected, approved, rolled onward. Every 50 seconds, another one clears the line. Fischer leans forward slightly. "How many per day?" he asks. Hayes checks his clipboard. "Yesterday, just under 7,000, this line alone." Silence settles among the prisoners, even as the machines roar on. 7,000, in Fischer's mind, images flash unbidden. German factories dispersed into forests, workshops hidden in tunnels, production quotas never met, orders from Berlin demanding increases that exist only on paper. He had been told, that American industry was inefficient, soft, civilian, that their workers lacked discipline, that democracy could not organize war. What he sees below him is not chaos. It is choreography. Every worker knows his task. No one shouts. No one runs. Tools are within arm's reach. Parts arrive precisely when needed. There is no stockpile rotting in corners. No empty spaces waiting for deliveries that never come. A woman, no older than 20, guides an engine mount into place, her movements quick, confident. She wipes her hands, steps aside, and the next unit rolls in immediately. Kranz exhales slowly. In Germany. He says quietly, almost to himself, this would be 2 factories. Hayes nods once. That's why we built one big enough. They move again, past cafeterias still open, serving hot meals at 12:30 a.m., past medical stations staffed and ready, past bulletin boards advertising war bonds, softball leagues, production records broken and replaced weekly. The POW are not mocked. No one jeers. No one stares at them with hatred. Most of the workers barely look up at all. They are too busy. That, more than anything, unsettles Fischer. The war here is not desperation. It is routine. As they near the exit, Fischer catches sight of the yard outside. Floodlights illuminate rows of finished vehicles parked nose to tail, stretching into the darkness. Beyond them, freight trains wait on parallel tracks, steam rising gently into the night. All of it moving, all of it ready. He feels something cold settle in his chest, heavier than fear, understanding. This factory will run until dawn, then the next shift will take over, then the next, tomorrow and the day after and the month after that. No bombing will interrupt it, no shortage will halt it, no retreat will bring it closer to the front. For the first time since the war began, Oberleutnant Karl Fischer realizes something he has never allowed himself to think before. Germany is not losing because of mistakes. Germany is losing because this exists, and it will never stop. June 15, 1944, 6:10 a.m. The sun is just beginning to lift over southeastern Michigan when the German prisoners are led back onto the bus. Fischer barely notices the change from night to morning. His eyes burn from fatigue, but his mind refuses to slow. As the bus pulls away from the River Rouge complex, he turns in his seat, craning his neck to keep the factory in view as long as possible. Smoke stacks stretch into the pale sky, still breathing steadily. Shift change sirens echo faintly in the distance, not signaling relief, but rotation. The machine does not sleep. It simply replaces its hands. Across the aisle, Feldwebel Kranz rubs his face with both palms. That was only one plant, he mutters. No one contradicts him. The bus rumbles onto the road, passing rail yards filled with cars marked with destinations Fischer recognizes instantly: New York, Baltimore. Norfolk, Los Angeles, names that had once meant nothing more than dots on a map. Now they feel like arteries. An American sergeant sits near the front, rifle resting across his knees. He isn't watching the prisoners. He's reading a newspaper. The headline catches Fischer's eye. Allied forces expand beachhead in France. The paper is dated today. Fischer leans back, closing his eyes, but the images keep coming, engines every 50 seconds. Trucks waiting, not for parts, but for finished goods. Workers arriving fresh at midnight as if it were morning. He thinks of castle of bomb, doubt assembly halls and machines dragged into forests, of foremen begging for steel that never arrives, of production targets quietly reduced, then reduced again. The bus slows as it approaches the POW camp outside Ann Arbor. Barbed wire fences glint in the early light. Guard towers stand at intervals, manned but relaxed. As they disembark, Fischer notices something else that unsettles him almost as much as the factory did. The camp is quiet, not the hollow quiet of exhaustion, but the orderly quiet of routine. Breakfast is already being served. POW line up with tin trays, coffee steams in metal urns, bread is fresh. Kranz snorts softly. They feed us better than our own depots did last winter. No one laughs. Inside the barracks, Fischer sits on his bunk and stares at the wooden floor. The others talk in low voices, fragments drifting through the room. They said 7,000 engines. Did you see the women working the line? No air raid shelters, nothing underground. They don't even hurry. Fischer reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small notebook. The Americans allow them to keep paper. He flips to a blank page and begins to write, almost automatically. Engines, 7 zeros. 0 per day. One line. He pauses, then adds more. Trucks, aircraft, ships. The numbers pile up quickly. and for the first time in his life as an officer, the calculations refuse to resolve into something manageable. No matter how he adjusts the figures, no matter how he imagines sabotage or bombing or delay, the outcome remains the same. The scale is too large. Later that afternoon, Fischer is summoned to the camp's administration building. He assumes it is routine, paperwork, perhaps another interview. Instead, he finds Captain Hayes waiting inside, seated across a plain wooden desk. Hayes gestures to the chair opposite him. "At ease, Oberleutnant," he says. "This isn't an interrogation." Fischer sits cautiously. Hayes studies him for a moment, then slides a folder across the desk. Inside are photographs, a shipyard, long slipways lined with hulls at various stages of completion, workers swarming over steel frames like ants. "Ever heard of Richmond, California?" Hayes asks. Fischer shakes his head. "Henry Kaiser's yards." Hayes continues. "We launched a cargo ship there in 4 days last year, from keel to sea." Fischer stiffens despite himself. "That is impossible." Hayes smiles faintly. "That's what the British said." He flips to another photograph. A long sunlit hole filled with aircraft fuselages, Willow Run. Hayes says, "One B-24 bomber every 63 minutes. Fischer's mouth feels dry. "These tours." Hayes continues, closing the folder. "They're not propaganda. We don't need them to be. You men are trained officers. You understand logistics, production." He leans back in his chair. "I'm curious, when you saw the Rouge Plant last night, what did you think?" For a moment Fischer considers saying nothing. Silence is safer, but something in Hayes' tone, not mocking, not threatening, loosens his resolve. "In Germany," Fischer says slowly, choosing his words, "we believed America would take years to become dangerous, that your industry was scattered, inefficient." Hayes nods, and now Fischer hesitates, then answers honestly. "Now I believe the war was decided before I was captured." Hayes does not gloat. He simply exhales. "That's what a lot of your officers tell us," he says eventually. Fischer looks up sharply. "Others have said this." "After the tours, yes." There is a pause. "Do they tell Berlin?" Fischer asks. Hayes shakes his head. "Some try. Letters are censored, and even if the message gets through." He shrugs. "It's hard to accept, isn't it?" Fischer thinks of the men still fighting in Normandy, of orders insisting on counterattacks without fuel, of factories promised in reports but absent in reality. "Yes," he says quietly, "it is." That evening, back in the barracks, Fischer writes again. Not numbers this time. Observations, no shortages, no fear, no pause. He realizes something else then. Something perhaps even more unsettling than the factories themselves. The American workers he saw were not desperate. They were not driven by terror of bombs or punishment. They worked because this was their contribution, because the system around them made it possible to focus on the task and nothing else. The war for them is distant, abstract, and precisely because of that, it is relentless. Days pass. More tours follow. Steel mills in Pittsburgh, tank assembly lines in Detroit, a munitions plant where shells roll off the line faster than artillery can fire them. Each visit reinforces the same truth. Germany is fighting a war of attrition. America is waging a war of replacement. One night, lying on his bunk, Fischer stares at the ceiling as the sounds of the camp settle into sleep. He thinks of something his old instructor at the War Academy once said. "Amateurs talk tactics," the man had said. "Professionals talk logistics." Fischer closes his eyes. Then America has already won. July 2nd, 1944. Camp Ann Arbor. A heavy rain drums steadily against the tin roof of Barracks C, muting the usual sounds of the camp. Inside, the air smells of damp wood and coffee. Fischer sits at the narrow table near the window, a sheet of American-issued stationery laid flat before him. His pen hovers above the page, unmoving. Around him, other prisoners write. Some draft letters home, some sketch maps from memory, some simply stare, lost in their own thoughts. The guards allow correspondence twice a week. Fischer has written often since his capture, careful, factual letters to his wife in Hanover. He writes about his health, about the food, about being treated correctly. He never writes about what matters. Today, he tries, he lowers the pen. Mein Lieb, I've seen things here that I cannot fully explain. He stops. The words feel dangerous even now. He knows the rules. All mail is censored. Any mention of factories, production, or military capacity will be blacked out, or worse, withheld entirely. Still, he continues, adjusting his language instinctively, things that make me believe this war will not be decided by courage alone. He pauses again. The rain intensifies, blurring the view beyond the window. Somewhere outside, an American radio plays softly. Swing music, upbeat, carefree. Fischer exhales and presses on. The enemy does not fight as we expected. Their strength is not only at the front. He knows this will never reach her. He knows it even as he writes, but the act itself matters. He needs to put the thought somewhere, anywhere, before it crushes him from the inside. Later that afternoon, Fischer is assigned to a work detail. Like many German POW in the United States, he is sent to assist local farmers short on labor. The truck carries them out past the camp, down roads lined with fields stretching to the horizon. Corn, wheat. Soybeans, no shell craters, no burn. Doubt machinery, no signs of scarcity. The farmer, a man named Harold Whitman, meets them at the gate. He is in his late 40s, sunburned, with a permanent crease between his eyebrows. He nods once at the guards, then looks at the prisoners. Plenty to do. He says simply, "They work until dusk, hands aching, shirts soaked through." Whitman brings water without being asked. At noon, his wife sets out sandwiches, thick with meat and cheese, and lemonade cold enough to fog the glass jars. Kranz shakes his head in disbelief as he eats. In France, this would feed a company. Fischer watches the fields sway in the breeze. He cannot help himself. Why so much? He asks Whitman, gesturing vaguely. Whitman squints at him. So much what? Food. Fischer says, crops, production. Whitman shrugs. That's just how we farm. The answer irritates Fischer more than any boast could have. There is no pride in it, no triumph, just fact. That night, back at camp, Fischer hears raised voices from the far end of the barracks. Two prisoners argue in low, urgent tones. They can't keep this up. One insists. It's impossible. No nation can sustain this level forever. Fischer says nothing. He has heard the argument before. It sounds like prayer disguised as logic. Weeks pass. News filters in through newspapers and guarded conversations. Cherbourg falls. The Allies push inland. American divisions appear faster than German intelligence had predicted. One evening, Captain Hayes returns to the camp. This time, he brings a visitor, a civilian in a plain suit, hair graying at the temples. He introduces himself as Mr. Edwin Thompson, an industrial planner. They gather a small group of POW officers in a recreation hall. No guards stand inside. The door remains open. Thompson speaks without notes. "Gentlemen," he says, "you've seen some of our facilities, not all, not even most, but enough." He walks slowly as he talks, hands clasped behind his back. Before the war, we had unemployment, idle factories, untapped capacity. This war didn't create our industry. It mobilized it. Fischer listens intently. In your country, Thompson continues, industry was already strained before 1939. Rearmament came at the cost of civilian production. Here, we added war production on top of an existing surplus. He stops in front of Fischer. That's the difference. Afterward, as the group disperses, Fischer approaches him. "You are not afraid?" Fischer says carefully that we will tell others. Thompson smiles. "You will," he says, eventually. He lowers his voice. But by the time it matters, it won't change anything. That night, Fischer cannot sleep. He stares at the ceiling, replaying every factory floor, every rail yard, every shipway he has seen. He imagines German officers poring over maps, planning counterattacks that depend on fuel that does not exist. He imagines engineers redesigning tanks while American factories simply build more. He realizes then that Germany is not just outproduced. It is outpaced. The war is moving at a speed Germany can no longer match. Weeks later, Fischer hears that another group of POWs, new arrivals from Normandy, will be taken on the same factory tour. He watches them board the bus, faces guarded, skeptical. He recognizes the look. As the bus pulls away, Fischer feels a strange, hollow certainty. By tomorrow morning they will know, and once you know, there is no way to unsee it. August 19th, 1944, Camp Ann Arbor. The heat presses down in a heavy, unmoving blanket, even as summer begins to wane. Fischer sits on a bench near the fence line, watching a new group of German prisoners file into the compound. Their uniforms are newer than his had been when he arrived. Their boots still hold shape. Some carry themselves with the stiff confidence of men who believe their war is not yet decided. Fischer knows how long that confidence will last. One of the newcomers, a Hauptmann named Ernst Weber, is assigned to Fischer's barracks. Weber fought in Normandy and escaped encirclement before being captured during a chaotic retreat. He speaks with certainty, with anger. The Americans have numbers, yes. Weber says that first evening, pacing the length of the room. But numbers alone do not win wars. Their troops are inexperienced. Their equipment is crude. Fischer listens without interrupting. They rely on comfort. Weber continues on excess. When winter comes, when losses mount, Fischer finally speaks. They will replace them, he says quietly. Weber stops pacing. Replace what? Everything. Fischer replies. Men, vehicles, aircraft. Losses are not obstacles to them. They are inputs. Weber frowns, dismissive. You sound impressed. Fischer meets his gaze. I am informed. Days later, Weber is selected for a factory tour. When he returns, he does not speak during dinner. He does not speak afterward. He sits on his bunk long into the night, elbows on knees, hands clasped tightly together. Finally, he looks up. How many did you say? He asks Fischer. Fischer answers without hesitation. Enough. From then on, the conversations in the barracks change. They become quieter, more technical, less ideological. Men discuss shipping capacity instead of Führer orders. Oil production instead of bravery, training pipelines instead of elite units. The vocabulary of belief is replaced by the vocabulary of logistics. Outside the camp, the war accelerates. Paris is liberated. Allied columns push toward the German border. American newspapers arrive daily, uncensored in their confidence. Headlines speak of advances measured not in meters, but in kilometers per day. One afternoon, Fischer and Kranz are again assigned to farm work. As they stack crates of produce onto a truck, Kranz wipes his brow and laughs humorlessly. They will never starve. He says, not their soldiers, not their civilians. Fischer nods. The abundance is not accidental. It is engineered. Back at camp, Fischer is called in once more to speak with Captain Hayes. This time the tone is different, less explanatory, more reflective. You've been here long enough now, Hayes says. You've seen more of this country than most Americans. Fischer allows himself a thin smile, more than I expected to. He says. Hayes folds his hands. When you go home, after the war, what will you tell people? Fischer thinks carefully. I will tell them, he says, that we fought a nation, not an army. Hayes nods, satisfied. That evening, Fischer returns to his bunk and opens his notebook one last time. He flips back through the pages, numbers, sketches, observations. He realizes he no longer needs them. The conclusion has already been reached. The American war effort is not heroic in the way German propaganda imagined war should be. It is not dramatic. It does not hinge on decisive battles alone. It is systematic, relentless, impersonal, and that is why it works. Months later, as winter approaches, Fischer hears news of the Ardennes offensive. He recognizes it immediately for what it is, a gamble born of scarcity, not strength. When reports of its failure arrive, there is no shock in the barracks, only confirmation. On a cold morning in early 1945, Fischer stands at roll call as snow drifts lazily onto the campgrounds. He breathes in the crisp air and feels, for the first time in years, a strange sense of clarity. The war will end, not with a single blow, but with a million quiet ones, each delivered by a factory that never slept, a worker who showed up on time, a train that arrived exactly when it was supposed to. Somewhere far away, machines are already running. April 12th, 1945, Camp Ann Arbor. The radio crackles to life just after morning roll call. The guards do not bother to turn the volume down. American forces have crossed the Elbe at multiple points. The sentence hangs in the air like a final verdict. Fischer stands motionless in formation, breath visible in the cool spring air. Around him, other German prisoners exchange glances, not shocked, not surprised. The news arrives exactly as expected. Weeks late, if anything, that afternoon, Captain Hayes walks the camp without escort. His cap is tucked under his arm. posture relaxed in a way Fischer has never seen before. He stops near the barracks, scanning the rows of wire and watchtowers as if seeing them for the first time. It won't be long now, he says when Fischer approaches. No, Fischer agrees, it won't. Hayes hesitates, then offers his hand. Fischer takes it. The gesture is simple, unceremonious, but it carries weight. You were right, Hayes says. You officers always are, once you accept the math. Fischer allows himself a brief smile. The math was unavoidable. In the days that follow, confirmation arrives piece by piece. Cities fall. Units surrender en masse. Orders dissolve into silence. On May 7th, the announcement finally comes. Germany has capitulated. There is no cheering in the camp, no wailing, just a long collective exhale. That evening, Fischer sits alone on the barracks steps, watching the sun dip behind the trees. Somewhere beyond the fence, a train whistle sounds, long and steady, followed by the distant rumble of freight cars rolling east. He knows what they carry: reconstruction supplies, food, machinery. The same system that crushed Germany's ability to wage war will now rebuild what remains of Europe. Kranz joins him, lowering himself heavily onto the step. So, he says, it ends like this. Fischer nods. It ended long ago. He replies, we just didn't know it. Months later, as repatriation begins, Fischer boards a ship bound for Europe. The port is crowded, efficient, humming with motion. Cranes swing effortlessly, loading cargo with mechanical precision. Dockworkers move with the same calm focus he saw in the factories months before. Nothing has stopped. As the ship pulls away, Fischer leans on the rail and looks back one last time at the American shoreline. He does not feel bitterness, only clarity. Germany lost the war when it bet everything on brilliance and neglected endurance. America won it by turning war into work, and work into habit. When Fischer eventually returns home, he will struggle to explain it. People will ask about battles, generals, mistakes. He will try to tell them about factories that ran all night, about trains that never waited, about an enemy that did not exhaust itself in moments of glory, but outlasted everyone else quietly, relentlessly. Most will not understand, but history will.